Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video, and today we are talking about Spioenkop's Queen MmaNthatisi White Blend 2018 made by winemaker Koen Roose. Koen Roose is a Belgian-born winemaker who operates out of the Elgin region. He began his university career in Belgium studying engineering, but he very quickly switched to the study of wine. He went on to become a sommelier and from there joined a business that was involved in importing South African wines to Belgium. It was during this phase of the business that he met a man named Francois Nordier in South Africa, who was then at Lavenier Estate. And Francois spotted the fire of a winemaker deep in his soul. And so he gave Koen the opportunity to come and train under him, which Koen immediately jumped at. And so he trained under Francois at Lavenier and then went on to do other training stints at an estate Takara in Stellenbosch, and from there he went to work some harvests in Burgundy, and it was in Burgundy that he really discovered this absolute obsession more for the vines than what was happening in the cellar. And so this obsession over vines birthed in him another dream, and that was to own his own vineyard. Now this dream came about in 2005 when he bought a farm in Elgin, and it was 6 years later in 2011 when the first Spioenkop vintages were harvested. Now, to make sense of the name Queen MmaNthatisi White Blend, one first has to make sense of the entire Spioenkop brand. Spioenkop is almost completely wrapped up in South African battle or war history. The name Spioenkop is inspired by a battle that took place in the year 1900 between the British and the Boers in what was then the Anglo-Boer War. And in case you were wondering, the Boers won that under the leadership of General Louis Botha. But aside from old Louis, it would seem that Koen's affinity for South African war heroes is almost exclusively aimed at female war heroes. He has a Chenin Blanc called the Sarah Rowell Chenin, which is named after an incredible young woman who was essentially orphaned when her parents and siblings disappeared, seemingly at the hands of the British. And she was forced to strike out on her own in order to join the Boer forces and fight against the British. There's some crazy stories there. She was an amazing guerrilla tactician that had huge influence on the war. Koen also has a Chenin Blanc called the Johanna Brunt Chenin. Johanna was a spy during that same Anglo-Boer War. Interestingly, both Sarah and Johanna were prolific writers, and both of them published tales of their wartime exploits, if you want to read those at another time. But for now, we need to focus on the woman of the hour, Queen MmaNthatisi. Queen MmaNthatisi was herself from the warrior tribe of the BaSia, but she married into the Batlokwa Tribe, and her story really gets going when she assumes leadership of the Batlokwa Tribe. Now this all went down roughly 75 years before the Battle of Spioenkop, so it was certainly not part of the Anglo-Boer War. But it did all take place in a similar region with what is today known as the Free State in South Africa. What happened was that MmaNthatisi was married to the chief of the Batlokwa tribe, who died unexpectedly. MmaNthatisi's son was too young to rule, and so MmaNthatisi became MmaNthatisi and was forced to be queen of the Batlokwa tribe. However, her tribe without its male leader was assumed to be a weak target, and so was attacked and obliterated by a neighboring tribe. And her family and all her tribe were driven from their homes. So really, her tale is one of grit and determination, because what she did is, despite having lost almost everything and having her tribe obliterated in battle, she began slowly rebuilding, leaning on her BaSia warrior heritage, essentially through a series of what were really quite fierce military raids on other smaller tribes. And so she conquered one small tribe at a time and incorporated them into the Batlokwa, building up what became one of the most fierce military empires of the time. So now that we know the inspiration behind the name, let's take a look at the wine itself and see what's in the glass. Well, even as we sniff it, we are already reminded that this is a 2018 vintage, so it's had quite a lot of time to mature in the bottle and develop some of those tertiary or time-related aromas. As a result, this guy has a nose like an elephant seal. There are these explosive, creamy, leesy, almost lemon curd elements, and these are wound up with fresher apricot notes and some lovely spicy citrus rind. Then, almost as another wave, you've got moodier elements of smoky flint and also waxy honeycomb, which is quite delightful. When we move on to the palate, well, there is a whole lot going on. There's just this supreme concentration across the entire palate. There's lime cordial, and then there's apricots, as we mentioned, but then there's also oranges and even some bitter almond right on the end. And of course, in amongst that is that savory, smoky flint that just pervades throughout the wine. And the tail end, I mean, I can still taste it. It's been lingering this entire time. As I said, a supremely concentrated lime cordial element that just won't quit. I must confess, when I was served this wine blind, I failed dismally at guessing what the cultivars were in the wine. But perhaps you will do better. So pause now before I tell you what's in here. All the fruit is from Elgin, from vines that have been worked and trained and pruned by Koen himself. There are only about 5 people working on the entire estate, mostly through a kind of ethos of if you want something done right, do it yourself. The wine is 70% Sauvignon Blanc. 23% of it is a Riesling, and then there's a fine little 7% splash of Chenin Blanc. Now that 23% Riesling and the 7% Chenin is barrel fermented, and that is partially where you get that kind of oaky spice that we detected on the aromas. But really, the sum of the parts is so much greater than the components when you look at what this wine is made of. Okay, so that's all we have time for today, but if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish 6 videos each month talking about things like wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the dynamic South African wine beds.